Hi, friends. Welcome back. I turned 40 in 2013, and I was at the top of my game. My career was strong, my health was strong, my identity was intact. I was walking 5 miles a day. I had it all figured out, or at least the important stuff. I thought I did anyway. But you know what? I didn't. I did not have it all figured out. The next 12 years taught me more about who I actually am and what actually matters than the 40 years before them combined. Those 12 years held a layoff after a 21-year career. The loss of both of my parents, years of caregiving, debt, a pandemic. These are not lessons I read in a book. They are lessons I earned the hard way. And they are exactly the things that I would go back and tell her. I am 52 now. And if I could go back and sit down with the woman that I was at 40, there are 5 things that I would tell her that would have changed everything for me. Here's the first thing I would tell her. The job title, the mother role, the caregiver, building my professional identity for over 20 years, none of that is actually who I am. It's just what I do, but it's not really who I am. It doesn't define me. I didn't learn this gently. I learned it the day a role that I had built for over 2 decades ended in a 20-minute phone call. And I found out at that point that I really needed to dig deep and find out what was left standing underneath it all. There was a morning not long after that phone call when I stood at my bathroom mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back at me. Not because of how she looked, because I could not have told you who she was underneath everything that she did for everyone else. But that was the day that I started looking for her. I had spent so many years mistaking the roles that I carried for the person wearing it. If I could tell her one thing first, it would be this. Start finding out who you are underneath the roles now, today, before life makes that question urgent for you. Here's the second thing. Somewhere in those 12 years, I gained weight that I never fully understood. And it took me years to realize it was not a food problem. It was a grief problem. A grief with nowhere else to go. Here's how quietly it happened. Over about 7 years, I lost 5 people in my family, including both of my parents. And I never once stopped to call it grief because I was too busy being the strong one. It was not a discipline problem. It was almost 100 pounds of grief that had nowhere else to go. Nobody brings you a casserole for the version of yourself that you lost. Nobody's checking in on you frequently for a role that quietly ended. But it's still grief, and it still needs somewhere to go. If it doesn't get named, it goes into the body instead. You have to identify it and name it and call it out. I would tell her, name it while it's happening. Third, I spent years waiting for the right circumstances, the right timing, the right version of myself before I would let myself want something different. That permission never arrived because it was never going to come from the outside. I did the math at 50 and realized how much of my life I had spent waiting for permission that nobody was ever coming to give me. My own mother only had 17 years left at the age I was turning. 17. Realizing that number was the day that the waiting stopped feeling safe. I would tell her to stop waiting for someone else to say that it's time. You are allowed to decide for yourself. Fourth, I used to think the big dramatic moves were what really mattered. The leaps, the reinventions, the grand gestures. What actually rebuilt my life was much smaller than that. It was one small decision, and then the next one, and then the one after that, on just an ordinary Tuesday morning with nobody watching. And a tube of mascara. I want you to picture how small that actually was. Standing at my bathroom counter, exhausted, putting on one coat of mascara for a woman I was not even sure I liked yet. That was it. That was the whole revolution. Not a plan, not a launch. One small act of showing up for myself on a day when nobody was watching. It wasn't a 5-year plan. It was one decision. That was the whole mechanism. And I didn't believe it until I actually lived it myself. And finally, fifth, the one that took me the longest to accept. I wanted to understand why before I would let myself move. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why now? Why me? Why not me? That understanding rarely arrives on a schedule, and waiting for it can cost you years that you do not get back. What I have come to believe through my faith, through Romans 8:28, is that all of it was working towards something, even the parts that made no sense at the time. So I stopped requiring the reason before I would take the step. And almost every good thing in my life now came after I started moving, not before. You do not have to understand why. You just have to take the next right small step in front of you. If I sat down across from the woman I was at 40 today, those are the 5 things I would tell her. Not because she could have avoided what was coming. She couldn't have. We don't have any control over that. But because she would have carried it differently. She would have carried it differently, knowing that she was not alone in this. And maybe she would have forgiven herself a little sooner along the way for any decision that didn't go right. I cannot go back and tell her, but I can tell you. So today, for whatever season you're in, I want you to keep going, one step at a time. I also want you to drop a comment and tell me this. Of those 5 things, which one do you need to hear the most right now? Just name the number. I want to know. Subscribe if this is helping. There's new video every week, and I'm not going anywhere. If any of this is landing with you and you want real support putting it into practice, there's a link in the description box for a free discovery call. No pressure. It's just there if you need it. So next week, I want to talk about a very specific kind of paralysis. Not the paralysis of having no options, but the paralysis of not trusting yourself to choose between the ones you have. That one is next week. I hope you'll come back. But until then, I want you to keep going because your next chapter is worth it.